What do dinners and community have in common, and why should associations care? We're going to talk about it in this special episode of Association Chat, where I interview Philippa Hughes. Today we're talking with Philippa Hughes. I am so excited to talk about everything curiosity, creativity, and community. Philippa, thank you so much. I know, it's so perfect. So, before we get all into your quest to bring people together, let's talk a little bit about how this all got started, because I know that a lot of people have to look at the life you've created for yourself and say, how did this happen? I mean, was it a winding path? Did you know from a child that you were going to do this? Give us a little background about how you came to do the things you're doing today.
We could probably talk for like an hour on the answer, because I've been thinking about that question a lot lately, because I'm working on a really big project right now, which I will tell you all about.
Yes.
But I realized that the major funding for this project came because 6 years ago, I met this woman named Leah in a bar, and we became friends. And then she introduced me to her friend Sebastian one night at another bar. There's a theme here.
The great joining place.
Yep.
Yes.
And then he took me on a trip to Berlin with his organization, and there I met this woman named Susanna. And then a couple years later, Susanna introduced me to this woman named Audrey, who does a podcast.
Wow.
About people who bring people together across the political spectrum. And then she introduced me to Congressman Curbello's office.
Okay. Wow.
And then that staff member put me in touch with this guy named Dan at New American Economy. And Dan came to my big dinner 1 year ago. And here we are.
So let's talk about the big dinner.
Isn't that
because
crazy?
That is insane, because that's like this journey. I can just, what we need to do is we need to have like the map, you guys, where it goes from one place to another.
I actually want to
visualize it.
I do want to map it out, because then there's this other weird series of things that had to happen for this project to work.
Yeah.
And I was a couple years ago, I was giving this little talk to 15-year-olds who were like these earnest young people in DC from all over the country. And they're like, how do you get to where you are? And
like,
I was like, and you know what I thought? I said something that I thought, I bet their parents are not going to like me to say this, but like, don't major in one thing, or don't like focus on one thing. Like, be really interested and curious about so many different things, because eventually it's all going to like connect back up, and it's really hard to plan ahead. And
you know that the parents were not happy about that.
The parents are like, no, you need to decide
you need to focus.
What your career is going to be.
Can't stay in school forever.
Yep.
Yes.
And I'm like, just try a bunch of things.
Okay, so you are called many different things. When I go to your website, when I watch some of the videos, social sculptor. I'm trying to activist of humanity. I mean, it's like all of these different things. And so these are not common position titles that you see on LinkedIn, right? So what is a social sculptor?
Okay. I actually stole that
from
an artist named Joseph Beuys.
Yeah.
He was most famous in the 60s and 70s, and he called himself a social sculptor, which meant he would sculpt spaces for social interaction. And the art would not be complete until people had those interactions. And those interactions were meant to build relationships, begin and then build relationships, because relationships are the most important thing that we can do, is to have them and build them and strengthen them.
What do you think gets in the way of people building? I mean, what are you seeing that gets in the way of people really naturally connecting and building those relationships today?
I mean, it's kind of the same thing that gets in the way of most people getting ahead in different ways. Fear, like we're afraid of sounding silly or dumb or not knowing enough. And, actually, okay, that's just a really interesting thing, because I work on these building spaces for cross-political conversations. A lot of times, even though people think they know understand the issues or facts. They have all the facts. But in fact, deep down, they know that they really don't. And so it is really hard to get into a conversation with somebody, a debate or an argument, because you're afraid you're going to look silly because you actually don't know all the facts.
You don't, and nobody wants to say that. They don't want to expose that you don't have all of the details. And I think, whenever you're talking about things like religion, sex, politics, all of these hot topics, that's an area where people, if they go down that path, they definitely don't want to appear vulnerable, like they don't have all of the facts. So obviously, Washington, D.C. area, it's very politically charged. These are topics that come up. And you have created these dinners that brought people together. And I think has helped you to, this is part of the project that you're doing. Can you talk to me a little bit about the project, how these dinners came to be and what you've learned from them? Let's start with how these dinners came to be.
Yes, and that vulnerability piece is like the core to all of this.
Wow.
Because I think the reason why these dinners are working now, after I tried and experimented with a lot of different things, is helping people to become more vulnerable. And that's really hard. We are in a society that doesn't really allow us we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I don't, I have to really work hard at it. I know it works.
Yeah.
But I know it's really hard for me too. So I'm very compassionate for the inability to go there, so to speak.
Yeah.
But anyway, to actually answer your question.
Well, it's okay. I gave you 5 to answer at the same time. So, yeah. So how did the dinners come together?
So right after the 2016 election, I, along with many others in my community, were upset about the results and very surprised by the results. And so 2, maybe 3 days after the election, I actually posted on Facebook this invitation to say, if you voted for Donald Trump, I would like to have you over to my house for dinner, and I will cook dinner for you.
Okay. Pause. What made you do that?
I know.
Because there were
Most
a
people
lot.
have that reaction.
Right. There were a lot of people who were surprised on both sides for what happened. And they weren't inviting people. I didn't go and invite people to sit down and have a discussion.
Most people didn't do that.
So what prompted you to do that?
Yeah. I think a little bit curiosity, because I was just so curious, what would make you do this? How could you see this person so differently from me? And, I've always been really interested in politics. And so in the run up to the election, during that whole campaign season, I mean, you could tell something was amiss, right? The fact that he even got nominated was what? That was surprising.
It was a surprise.
Yeah.
People, even staunch Republicans were surprised that this was happening, right?
And so during that time, I was reading all these books, like The Hillbilly Elegy and Gilded Rage. I read all the books. I watched all the shows trying to figure it all out. And then the election happened, and I thought, wow, I don't understand a thing.
I still don't understand what happened.
And so then I don't know what motivated me other than I want to talk to people face to face, because clearly reading a book about people was not enough. And plus, when you talk to somebody, you can ask questions and it's unfiltered. I did not want information filtered through media, basically, through somebody else's viewpoint. And so I wanted to ask questions face to face.
So you invite people along. First of all, did you get a lot of people who were responding?
No, nobody responded.
So what'd you do then?
So then a lot of liberally friends were like, I'd like to come. And I'm like, well, if you want to come, you have to find me.
Wow. Oh, wait. So you had liberal friends who said, I want to come. And you're like, rule is you got to find somebody on the opposite side, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I will say, though, that several liberally friends basically lambasted me and were like, why are you doing this? You're such a, you're an idiot. Why would you sit down with those people? So there was that too.
Yeah.
But there were also the ones who were like, yep, I'm really curious too. So one of those friends, Debbie, actually was like, I think I used to work with one.
It's an exotic animal out in the wild. Yes.
Yeah, totally. And so she put me in touch with this woman, and indeed she had voted for Trump. And then, as we know, people hang out with others like themselves. So so I asked her, so, do you know anybody else I could invite? And indeed she did.
So you were really looking for a balance. You wanted to have meaningful discussion that would get to the heart of what's going on here. Where are people coming from? What are the values? How did we get to where we are?
Yep. And the second people walked in the door, we just started arguing. And it was good. It was actually pretty respectful.
Yeah.
But we were arguing like from the first minute, partially because we were all strangers to each other.
Well, and also emotional, right? Because it was
very
raw.
Emotional.
There was this big thing that had hit the country, and either way, people were very heightened senses of,
on both sides too. I mean, people who. Everybody was surprised. So even people who had voted for him hadn't expected him to win. So there was a different kind of emotion happening there.
Yeah.
But it was very emotional. That first dinner took place 3 weeks after the actual day of election.
Did it surprise you, that dinner?
No, to be honest, it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I had read enough to understand where people were on issues, and so I think at the end, so then, because I kept doing it over and over and trying to experiment with different ways of getting people to be more vulnerable.
Well, and let's take a step back. What made you say, okay, so we got over the hump of, I'm going to go and see how we got to this point. I want different viewpoints at my table. How do you get from having the first dinner to deciding you're going to have several of these?
Because I hadn't answered all my questions.
What questions did you have left?
What I realized is talking about issues, that's just a vehicle for getting at who you really are.
Yeah.
That's what I really wanted to know. Who are you really?
Yeah.
What life experience? What made how did you get to the point where you believe these policy things?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, the policy stuff to me, I find it intellectually interesting.
Right.
But that's not what really matters. What really matters is what are your stories, and what is the human level of what made you believe these things? Yeah. And that's where the dinners became more successful, is when we started doing more storytelling, doing things that help to humanize before we even get. So for the second dinner, I told everybody, and it was a different set of people. I told everybody they couldn't talk about politics, and for the first half hour until I gave the cue. So then it was this sort of awkward
So what'd you talk about? Right.
Lately,
so you have to get to know each other on a different, about everything else.
Yeah. So then it was so awkward. Yeah. So awkward. So then on the third dinner, I still had the no politics rule. But then I did some research and I found a set of questions. It's called, there's another organization called Ask Big Questions. Mm-hmm. And they have a set of questions that are really fantastic. And they had a civics edition. So I borrowed the civics edition and I handed out these questions. So then it took a little bit of the awkwardness away of trying to think of something to talk about.
Right. So you're kind of guiding them into this place where they can have a more productive conversation. Yes. And they know a little bit more about the other person before they get to the hard stuff, right?
Yeah.
A lot of associations have this problem where, whether it's about politics or policies or what's happening with the industry, they're trying to figure out, how do they have these hard conversations? What have you learned about how to make that process easier? And are there any challenges or red flag, don't do this? What have you found that works best for these types of conversations?
Well, one thing, that's why being a social sculptor is very handy, because a lot of people do want to have these conversations.
Yes.
And so when you create the space for those conversations, people will enter that space. Mm-hmm. But it is hard to create your own space for it. So I get that.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about maybe there are other social sculptors out there. And there actually are.
Have you been meeting them?
Yeah. So I actually even made a database of anybody
You're
find
kidding.
Out about.
Wait, there's a database of social sculptors.
No. More people who are organizing dinners or doing anything in this realm of bringing people together.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is it a large database? Are there a lot of people doing it?
It's a pretty large database.
Nobody's doing it in my neighborhood. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to come visit you.
That's what we need, though. We need more people to be doing it, because it's not for everybody to do. Like,
right.
Not everybody wants to have a dinner party or whatever.
Well, and people are scared. Like, if I were to throw this, I'll tell you, like, if I were going to go and I'm saying, I want to be Philippa, I want to bring people together around my table. I do want to bring people together. I've had hard conversations, but let me tell you how much stress I've felt about having those, because I'm like, oh, what if I say the wrong thing?
Yeah.
Or what if and you're going to, you're going to step on.
So that's the point. It's like, you're going to say the wrong thing. So I think creating the space to say, okay, here are some ground rules. And that's, I think, how you make the space a place where people hopefully can feel like they can be vulnerable and talk. But
so they're safe.
Yeah,
so
I
feel
know. I was trying to avoid saying that.
Because it's not safe?
It is, except that...
Wait, it's not? No. I'm just teasing.
I've been trying to avoid using certain language because I don't want to come off as being too liberally sounding. Because liberals tend to say...
Is it liberally sounding? Oh, no.
Liberals tend to say, they want to create safe spaces.
Oh, my gosh. Is that triggering? No, I'm sorry.
It's
I had to
triggering
go
for
there.
some people.
Okay.
Not for me, but...
So make it more comfortable. Is that good? Comfortable? Open setting?
A friend suggested, a thing now that people are trying to do is create brave spaces, but that just sounds too woo-woo to me.
That sounds more woo-woo than safe space.
Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
All right. There's I don't know, maybe.
Well, I don't know.
Brave spaces.
Right. I don't use those words, but I don't know what to call it either.
So say we're having dinner together.
Yeah.
And we've invited people with all kinds of different ideas.
There's a great book out right now called The Art of Gathering.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. And that's kind of like my little Bible. The woman who wrote that, Philippa Parker, is like, I feel like we're very kindred. But one of the things she really talks about is when you have a set of rules around your gathering, then people know what to expect and
structure.
And you set a tone.
There's structure.
There's a structure. You're setting tone and a vibe,
Right.
And so, for example, if you want to create a space where you're going to have this very difficult political conversation, a few things that I always start with when I'm bringing people together is one thing is, you're not here to win. There is no winning.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, because that's the thing, everybody wants to win the argument. And it's like, no, we're not here to win.
What about persuade? Because that's a natural thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of, that's a subtopic of winning. You're not here
How
to persuade.
can you say that?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're here to be curious and to listen. But see, and also I feel like everything I say, and I have this little spiel when I'm talking to the group, and it's all to me sounds like stuff that we kind of learned when we were little kids.
Yeah.
Your parents taught you okay, you should look people in the eye, ask questions, don't talk too much, be brief and don't interrupt. Listen without trying to think about what your answer is going to be.
Right.
We all kind of know all of that.
Do we, though?
Well, I do actually think we know it at some level. And so when somebody stands there and says, okay, we're doing this now.
Yeah.
Here are the rules.
Then people will snap too.
They kind of snap to it.
Okay.
I feel very hopeful after doing this.
You may be more optimistic, but you've been through this. So you've actually seen this in action.
Yeah, I've seen it in action. When you create the opportunity for people to do this, they engage with it. It's awesome.
That's a beautiful thing, but I know that there are people who are going to hear this and say, look, I need rules. What exactly is that structure? What's the 1, 2, 3 that I give to everybody? And also with the seating and with things like that. Do you find that people tend to want to all of us on one side, all of them on the other? Is that the natural?
You're
right.
Mind, of course.
Because you feel protected.
So that's why it's a highly curated experience. I put people where I make sure there's an artist at every table. I make sure there's an even number of liberals and conservatives.
Wow. Now, did you do that on the first one?
No.
Or is this stuff you've learned along the way?
Yeah, this is all stuff I've learned. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you have to as the host, you have to maintain control. I mean, it's your party. So you get to say, okay, you're sitting here, okay, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that. If you have agreed to come to my party, this is what you're doing.
So
I should write a toolkit.
You should. You should.
Yeah.
I think everybody would buy it. I would buy it. I would be very interested to see what that is, because you have, and let's talk a little bit about that, because at this point, how many of these things have you put together? Like, how has this grown since that initial dinner?
I've done tons of the small dinners in my home.
Yeah.
But so I did 2 really big ones here in DC, one at Hyrick House Museum and then one at the Phillips Collection.
Yeah.
Because my thought process on that is art is a way into these conversations. They frame the conversation.
Oh my gosh.
But I became inspired, because I work in the arts, so I'm interested always in how art can be integrated.
Yeah.
But also, I met this amazing woman a little while ago, Alif, who has been doing research on how awe and wonder can help us feel more curious about other humans. And when you feel more curious, you gain more empathy for others.
Okay, let me break this down. Awe and wonder. Mm-hmm. So awe and wonder leads us to be more curious. And when we're more curious, we have more empathy for others.
Yes.
That makes sense.
And art is a thing that induces awe and wonder.
Yeah.
It's just like when you look at a beautiful sunset or, a beautiful landscape.
Right.
You feel a sense of awe, and you feel more connected to the world and to the fabric of humanity. You feel more part of all of that.
So did you find that in holding it in a space? I mean, so to be fair, you live in a very artistic space.
Yes.
So that's also everywhere here too. But did you find in holding it in, museums and art galleries and things like this, that it was a different sort of, I don't know, feel or vibe?
Yeah, I do think, when you step into some institutional place like that, and it is very beautiful, whatever, you do, again, you're kind of more on your best behavior.
Right.
So I do think it helps with that. I am very concerned about the intimidation factor of stepping into a museum space. Yeah. And so actually, that's why for this larger project, which we keep alluding to, and we haven't actually...
let's talk about it. We should break into this, because obviously it's just going to be a secret forever if we don't share what's going on.
But I will say that's why we've been doing the events in libraries. A couple of them are in museums of history. So doing these amazing art exhibits, but putting them in places that feel more like accessible and community driven and just more neutral.
So let's talk about the project. Let's talk about it. Yes.
Okay, so I'm actually in the midst of the project right now. It's called Looking for America. And with this project, I'm curating an art show in 6 cities with local artists in each city. And they all answer the question, what does it mean to be American in your community?
Wow.
And then we bring at least 50 people from across the political spectrum into the space where the art is. And this is where I highly curate all the tables. And then we have a conversation. And, I lead people through the conversation.
Wow.
So this happens and this happens. It works. It really works.
So what is it works and success? What does success mean in this sort of situation? When you walk away from the table, it's you've had the dinner. How do you know that it's been successful?
Okay.
Not everyone's hugging, right?
No,
that's not going to happen.
People do feel... so it's very anecdotal, we hear over and over, I never would have had that conversation. We argued. I feel like these are all indicators of success. Yeah. That people had a conversation they never would have normally had.
Yes.
They talked to somebody that they never would have even wanted to talk to before that night.
Yeah.
But, I know. I don't know what the metric for success is. We're still right in the middle of it, and we're still learning a lot. So, each time we do something a little different the next time because, oh, yeah, that didn't work so well. We do a survey after each one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like, maybe for me, a success would be a couple people from each dinner host their own dinners. That would be amazing.
Yes.
I think that would be a fantastic success.
And I think in leading the way and showing people how to do that in a way you're saying not only can you do this is how you can do it. This is what you can expect from it and go off. And maybe you create that kit and then they go and do it. why do you think it is that these discussions aren't organically happening? Do you think tech plays a role in that?
I want to get back to the tech question, but one piece is that we are becoming actually physically divided from each other. Like there's a sort of rural urban thing happening. Lots of liberals live on the coast. I mean, we're physically divided from each other. So we're literally like, I'm in DC, 96% Democrats here.
Yeah.
Like it was really hard to find people to talk to on the other side of the spectrum.
Right.
So that's a big part of the problem is we're just not even around each other physically.
Yeah.
But tech, man, it's so interesting. Like I have a very strong relationship to social media. Like I'm on it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's a tool that we can use for good or evil. And some people don't use it properly.
Yeah.
They use it to yell at each other.
Yeah.
But to say things that they would never say to somebody face to face. And I think that is such a danger. And that's why these dinners are so important. It's like, you know what? Say that to me, sit across and break some bread with me and say that to me.
I agree. I think that what you're doing is also significant because with technology and with the way that society's going, I could sit here, you could sit here, you could order your groceries to your door. You would never have to leave.
Yes.
You don't have pets, I see, but you could have somebody come and groom your pet. You never have to leave ever. And we've made it so simple to not have to have these exchanges. I don't ever even have to bump into somebody at the grocery store if I don't want to.
No,
what does that mean?
Even the smallest interactions we don't even have anymore. Just the bumping into somebody and saying, "Oh, excuse me, sorry." Like just any kind of human interaction. That reminds me. I was just in Sioux City, and I was in a diner for breakfast one morning. And as I was leaving, this family went ahead of me, and their little boy, maybe he was 8 or 9, held the door open for me.
Oh.
And his family had already walked through, and I was like, "Oh no, that's okay." And he's like, "No, he just stood there and held the door open." And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much." And I was like, "Oh, it was such a lovely little interaction that was not significant, in the greater scheme of things.
But it was.
It was. We just exchanged a few words, and I praised him for doing this thing, and then now he'll probably do it again,
Yeah.
I don't know. We just need more interactions at every level.
I mean, aren't our lives made up of that? It's that human element. I think technology is fantastic, but I do think that these conversations have an added value because we don't find ourselves sitting at a common table regularly anymore. And we don't, things like organized religion, whatever religion it is, there's not as much attendance at churches, synagogues, all of this stuff where we would naturally connect with people. So we have our associations and we have these events where a social sculptor is bringing people together. And I think that the value increases on that, because you don't have the opportunity to have those conversations as much.
And we're human, humans need it. We're social animals.
Yeah.
And so we're actually craving it. So it is very weird that we're making ourselves more disconnected from each other.
So I think an obvious thing is while you're doing this and you're going to these different places, you have how many different, I know you were mentioning before, you have all of these different locations that you have upcoming dinners where it's more of this bringing people together. What happens next?
Yeah, so we're in the midst of trying to plan for 2020, basically, to say, we have these 6 case studies, so to speak, and what have we learned, and what can we do to, my vision is we'd do it in 50 states. We'd have a 50-state plan, but just doing 6 was so hard. So if we're going to do 50 states, we've got to come up with a better plan than me doing all the work, basically.
Right.
So there's that. But, going back to this toolkit idea, I was thinking it's a very loose, imperfect analogy, but this idea of, teaching how to fish rather than giving people fish. I don't necessarily just want to say, here's a toolkit, go do it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, and somehow inspire people to do that, because the toolkit, it's easy. It's easy. what's the hard part is saying, no, you have to go do it. You have to go do it. And you have to go do it. And how do we do that? Because we can easily distribute a toolkit.
Association people, what do you think?
Yes.
I feel like we can come up with a solution. Before we go, and I have to say thank you so much for welcoming us into your home, which, just absolutely beautiful, but taking the time to share this story with us. And it's an amazing project. So when people are looking at trying to develop their curiosity and sitting down, even if it's not at an official, like one of your dinners, but maybe they sit down at Thanksgiving dinner or holiday dinner of some sort with their family members that they disagree with, how can people go down that vein of developing their curiosity or having more meaningful conversations?
I mean, I start with like the why question, like ask why, ask how, what, if somebody says something to you that the Thanksgiving dinner scenario is like very apt. I mean, that's the thing most people say is like, oh, I can't even go home for Thanksgiving anymore,
right.
Which is so sad. But instead of like getting angry, like just be like, actually, I remember there's like an advice columnist that used to always say this, like, if somebody says something that you think is offensive, you can ask, why would you say something like that? Or, but not in I didn't say it that quite right, but
yeah.
But like, ask why.
Yeah.
Ask how. And be curious.
How did you arrive at that?
How did you arrive at that conclusion?
Right.
And then just keep asking questions.
That's harder for me because I tend to be one of those people who's like, like, just like, we're going to let that part pass.
I mean, that's the problem. It's like, we're just going to let it pass. I mean, I'm not,
You're saying there's something wrong with my approach? No.
Yeah,
but
I mean, that's how most people are. Like, that's me too.
Maybe we take the time to understand, is what you're saying, and get a little curious.
Yeah, because it's just easier to just be comfortable, let everybody feel comfortable. I'm like, let's just lean into some discomfort here.
Let's lean into some discomfort. I think that says it all. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today.
This is fun.
Yeah.